Well, I'm delighted to be joined by legendary boxing writer Colin Hart. And Colin, this week is all about the heavyweight division and in particular Tyson Fury. And we want to know where Tyson compares to some of the greatest heavyweights of all time. And you're the man that we want to get some insight and knowledge from.
Yeah.
And when you look at Tyson Fury, my opening question would be, how does he compare to some of the greatest heavyweights that you've seen?
Well, this is the start of a load of arguments in bars, clubs, you name it. It's an age-old problem. Who is the best? Who is the greatest? And you're trying to compare fighters from completely different eras, which is not easy. I was very fortunate. I covered what has been described as the golden age of heavyweights. So for me, Ali, Foreman, Holmes, Frazier, and even Tyson, in my opinion, would all have beaten Tyson Fury. All at their best, all in their prime. There's no doubt in my mind that Ali would have been too fast for him. I mean, I'm not knocking Fury, he's a very good fighter, and he would have given every one of them a tremendous fight. But I think that their experience, the fact that they beat higher class opponents than Fury has had to meet. I mean, Wilder, 3 terrific fights, but apart from his tremendous punch, Wilder, didn't have a lot else going for him. And the other man he beat, who was world class, was Vladimir Klitschko when he won the title. It mustn't be forgotten that Klitschko was 75 days off his 40th birthday. So you could hardly say he was in his prime. But Fury is enormous. He's 6'9", 19 stone, a very formidable hunk of beef.
It's so difficult to compare boxers from different generations, but one thing we do have which we can compare is the records they have. When you look at Fury, 30 wins, 1 draw, but then when you compare him to the likes of Ali, Holmes, Foreman, some of these guys fought 60, 70 times. Yes, they suffered defeats, but their activity is incredible compared to someone like Fury now.
Well, yeah, I mean, Fury's had 32 fights. It is not the number of fights that really matters. It's the men they fought and beat, the class of fighter they fought. And you'll find, if you go through the records of Ali, Holmes, Foreman, or the ones I've already mentioned, they met a very higher class of opponent throughout their career than Fury has had to do.
When you look at the fights that Fury's been in, you mentioned there taking on Wilder 3 times, taking on Klitschko, who was heading towards the end of his career. What would Fury need to do for you to put himself right in that conversation with the names you've mentioned?
Right, wave a magic wand and send him back 30, 40 years so he was in that particular era I've been mentioning. And then if he was in against those guys and he beat those guys, then I would say he's the greatest heavyweight who ever lived. He wouldn't, in my opinion, have beaten them. He would have given them good fights and given them a lot of trouble because of the sheer size. And he's a good boxer. He's got a good boxing brain. But would he have beaten Ali? No. I'm talking about all in their prime. Holmes reigned for 7 years. World heavyweight champion for 7 years. And they all fought the best that was around at that time. Now, Fury is beating the best that was around at that time, but the best ain't very good.
I wanted to ask you about that then, because you suggest that Fury wouldn't beat some of the greats. What are maybe Fury's deficiencies compared to these guys, or what did these athletes do which was so superior to what Fury can do now?
I think ringcraft, which Fury has got, experience, and as I say, having to fight very good challengers, and they were on a higher plane than Fury's opponents.
You spoke before about the golden age of the heavyweight division. How would you describe this current era? Because maybe this current era isn't complete because we haven't seen the likes of Fury fight Joshua fight Usyk again in this rematch, Usyk fight Fury.
Well, this is, again, the difference between the eras. Nowadays, because of the politics of boxing, these fighters are aligned to particular TV companies, Whereas back to the golden age I'm talking about, they all fought each other. And now we've got this struggle. We've been waiting how many years for Fury and Joshua to fight? I think it's at least 5 years since Joshua first won the title. We've talked about him and Fury. And it still hasn't happened and may never happen. Whereas Ali fought Frazier 3 times, he fought Norton 3 times, he fought Foreman, he fought everybody. And that is the difference between the eras. So unfortunately, Fury is at a disadvantage for not being able to fight the best in his era, which allegedly is Joshua.
Are there any attributes you think Fury has which puts him in the same conversation as some of these greats? One thing I would think about would be his versatility. The fact when you look at the 3 fights against Wilder, he showed different skills at different parts of the fight and won all 3 fights. I guess the first fight was a draw, but in different ways.
Well, he won the first fight in most people's opinion, including mine, and they gave it a draw. Think about Fury, as I say, he's got a good boxing brain. He's got a decent jab. One thing I find amazing about him is his powers of recovery when he's hit and hurt. I mean, the way he gets up off the floor when he's been put down. It's amazing that first time with Wilder. Nobody knows, even himself, how he got up from that punch. When was it, the 11th round? Anyway, so he's brave.
That was the 12th round in that first fight.
Yeah, well,
and he ended up winning the round.
No, yes, that's right. It was the 12th round. Sorry, my memory's not what it was. But I remember the knockdown. Who could ever forget it? Fury, as I say, is big, strong, brave, and he's a good fighter. All I'm saying is he's good, but not great.
You spoke before about Larry Holmes, the fact that he dominated the division for something like 7 years.
Yeah.
How important is that for you, that period of reign, the length, the longevity they had at the top when, in your mind, you're working out who you think are the greatest heavyweights of all time?
Well, Holmes, I think, is arguably the second best heavyweight there's ever been to Muhammed Ali. I mean, he had a better jab than Ali, and that's saying something. He had an incredible chin. Towards the end of his career, of course, Tyson slopped him, but then Tyson was virtually in his prime, and Holmes was an old man then when they did fight. But Holmes had everything. He could fight, he could box, he was brave, he had a good chin. He was no one's perfect, but as near perfect a heavyweight as you could wish for.
With Fury and what he offers outside of the ring, the way he speaks, the engaging character which he is, how does he compare in that type of way, the personality, the larger-than-life persona he has compared to someone like Ali?
But when it's come to charisma, I suppose he could give Ali a run for his money. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he's amazing in front of a microphone or in front of a crowd. I mean, he really knows how to get a crowd on his side and how to get a crowd going. And he's learned from his mistakes when he said so many stupid and nasty things early in his career. And he's learned his lessons from that. I mean, some of the things he came out with were dreadful. But fortunately, he's made people forget that because of his charisma, and he is funny. He can be very funny. But also, he could be very foul-mouthed, which you can get away with in this day and age. You couldn't get away with that in Ali's era. Mind you, when you look at all the stuff that Ali came out with, I bet you never heard him swear once.
It'd be foolish not to ask you about this current heavyweight era we're in.
It's a good era.
Do you think it has the potential to be like the golden era you spoke about, if all these fighters fight one another numerous occasions and we get a unification fight at some stage?
Well, look, if I may go back again, I mentioned the champions who were around in the golden era. There were a lot of very good heavyweights as well. Bonavina, Jerry Quarry, Ernie Shavers. They were all world-class heavyweights. Today, at the moment, we're talking about 4 men. I mean, Wilder we must say, is off the scene at the moment. He may never fight again, who knows. But we're really talking about not 4 men, 3 men. We're talking about Fury, Usyk, and Joshua. And there's only 3, and we still can't get them together because of the boxing politics and the animosity between TV companies, between promoters. It's not happened yet. I mean, we keep saying, hopefully this year we will see it. And of course we had problems last year with COVID. So it's a bit unfair why it didn't happen in 2021. There's really nothing to stop them in 2022, except for people being bloody minded and wanting more money than they're worth, maybe.
How far behind Fury is Anthony Joshua in your eyes?
I think Joshua is a spent force. I think the Joshua of a few years ago we'll never see again. I think he's gun shy. I think that was proved against Pulev. If you remember, I think it was the 4th or the 5th round, he had Pulev all over the place. And the bell went, and the next round, instead of going in to finish the job, what did he do? He stood off him, and it went another 4 or 5 rounds, which he shouldn't have done. So, there's a flaw in Mr. Joshua at the moment, in my opinion. I think if Usyk fights him again, he will beat him again, and that will mean we will never see Joshua and Fury.
What have you made of Anthony Joshua's decision to have this rematch with Alexander Usyk?
Well, I mean, I'm not his manager, unfortunately, or his promoter. What I would have said to Joshua, sit back, wait, let Fury fight Usyk, and then you fight the winner.
Can a fighter like Joshua make the necessary changes to his training camp, to his setup, to his mindset, to be able to take on Usyk and beat him so soon after that fight in September?
Well, he's now changing his complete training regime, from what I understand. It looks like Robert McCracken is going to leave the camp. He's going to bring a new training regime. He's over 30 years of age. Can leopards change their spots at that time of life? I doubt it. So I don't think mind you, what happened in his corner during the Usyk fight was a disgrace. I don't know what was going on there, but there wasn't one voice telling him what to do. Seemed to be several voices telling him what to do, and he couldn't do it anyway.
Let's go back as we conclude to the main topic today, which is Fury and where he compares to the greatest heavyweights of all time. And when you're putting together your top 10, your top 5, where's Fury in that list?
Well, I would put him in the top 6, but at number 6.
And who's ahead of him?
Well, I told you, I think Ali would have beaten him. I think Holmes would have beaten him. I think Foreman would have beaten him. I think Frazier would have beaten him. I think Tyson would have beaten him.
Could anything convince you over the next 2 or 3 years that Fury could jump up that list?
Well, unless we had modern equivalent of the men I've mentioned, no.
So even if he beats Usyk, unifies and then beats AJ?
Well, Usyk, if he beats Usyk is a brilliant, brilliant technician. He's a built-up cruiserweight, right? And he's never considered a great heavyweight because he's not really a heavyweight. I mean, he just run out of opposition amongst the cruiserweight. He's mopped it all up. So there's no one for him to fight at that weight anymore. That's why he's moved up, because that's also phase he can make far more money fighting the big boys than he can fighting the cruiserweights.
And finally, if Fury was to beat Dillian Whyte, if that fight happens, Usyk beats AJ, which you think is going to happen when they meet in April, what happens if Usyk and Fury meet in the ring?
Fury beats him. And the reason he beats him, I mean, they're both good boxers. I mean, as I've just said, Usyk is a brilliant technician, but he can't give away that height and that weight to Fury. He's just too big for him.
Would that be a stoppage victory for Fury?
Because Fury's also got a big heart.
And so you think he'd stop him?
Probably not. Probably outpoint him.